I'm Ron Nash, and in 2007, I decided after 46 years of not writing a book, my first one was when I was 11, in Mrs. DeVille's class, called The Underground Cave, which is a little redundant. All caves are probably underground. It took me 46 years to write the second one. I started teaching in 1972, and in 1967, when I got to college, there were 50 of us sitting in a room, prospective history teachers, dressed in our finery, which then was button-down shirts, slacks, dress shoes, waiting with bated breath for a member of the history faculty to come and welcome us to Clarion and to our future. And he walked in and he sat down on the edge of the teacher's desk up front, and the first words out of his mouth were, "Become a plumber, because there are no jobs in teaching for you." I think that the reason I wrote this book was an attempt to help today's teachers, many of them millennials. And you know, if you're a teacher now, you can get a job. You can get a job almost anywhere, except in small communities. But if you're willing to move to a city, you can get a job. The question is, what are they going to do with the kids once they get there? And part of the answer for Power of We is that they've got kids in face-to-face conversations. They've got them in quartets, working together, problem-based learning, project-based learning, paired verbal fluency, and other strategies that get the kids talking to each other. Why do I want them to do that? Because they build something that Andy Hargreaves and Michael Fullen call social capital, and they build empathy. And we have a real empathy deficit in this country right now. We have kids committing suicide. We have students who will claim to have 500 friends online, and yet 48, in a recent study by Cigna, 48% of young people between the ages of 18 and 22 reported that even though they have those friends and likes, that they have no one to whom to turn. They don't have any actual friends. And so the suicide rate has gone up. The obesity rate has gone up incredibly because they're not outside, they're not playing games. And so I think we've got a crisis. And I think it's been building, and I think the only way for us to deal with that is to work in the schools to get those kids involved in their own education. The Power of We, the energy for the Power of We comes from kids working with kids, kids working with teachers, teachers working with kids, teachers working with teachers, administrators working with everybody, and building programs from the ground up. I would say that what makes this book different from other books, and teachers are interested in that, and administrators are interested in that if they're going to buy the book. What makes this book different is there are a lot of stories in this book, and one of them is mine. I tell my own story. As a new teacher, I was, how shall we put it, clueless. Had no idea what I was doing. Out of a 50-minute period, I lectured for 45 minutes. I walked around saying things like, hunker down now, hunker down. And so I think the thing that makes this different is the practical nature of this. There are tons of strategies in this book, and there are tons more strategies in the supplement book, And What About You? These are companion volumes that can be bought separately, but they can also be bought together, and they complement one another. So practicality, stories, humor, and they're fun to read. Pairs are just easier, and it's more fun for the kids, it's less threatening for the kids, and that's why I encourage them. Whenever an assistant principal says, what do? I say start with pairs. The beauty of pairing is it is the least impossible thing for students to do. If you put students in groups of 4, 5, or 6, and they don't know how to listen, and they don't know how to speak properly, and they don't know how to work together, it's going to fail. And what happens is teachers then fail they blame the strategy. Well, this didn't work because that strategy doesn't work. When the problem is that the students don't know how to work together. They don't know how to collaborate. They don't know how to communicate. The beauty of pairs is you can't hide in a pair. You're responsible for your partner. And once you get kids to be able to work in pairs, learning to listen, learning to paraphrase, okay, learning to summarize, which is a version of that, learning to use body language correctly, and so forth. Once you get kids, they can do that in pairs. Once they can do that in pairs, you can move them into quartets easily. And start with basic conversations like, what would you do with a 2-week vacation? What would you like to do? What would you do with a free day? What would you like to be when you grow up? What are you thinking? And what does it mean to be empathetic? And what makes a good friend? Those kinds of questions that are life questions. You know, life is messy, and what we're doing with them when we have them have these conversations and learn to cooperate with each other is giving them a life lesson, not worksheets. Dr. Carol Dweck, who wrote the book Mindsets, literally wrote the book, talks about 2 kinds of mindsets. One is a growth mindset, one is a fixed mindset. When she was in the 6th grade, when Carol Dweck was in the 6th grade, her teacher had them sit by IQ. So the lowest IQ sat furthest away and the highest IQ sat closest to her. And what that does is it gets kids to think that I'm a failure. I'm never going to be any better than this. This is what I'm going to have for the rest of my life. And what that can lead to, what happens if kids begin to not believe in themselves and not think they can move forward, they get a fixed mindset, and it keeps them from making mistakes. They don't want to make mistakes. They don't want to fail. They're afraid of it. What Carol says is growth mindsets are you approach failure as opportunity. You approach mistakes as mandatory. Kids ought to make mistakes. They ought to be encouraged to make mistakes. They ought to be encouraged to fail, because any coach, I go back to coaching, any good coach will tell you the most teachable moment is when somebody makes a mistake. The best principal I ever knew, Kathy Wong, who is sadly gone, started in a new school many years ago. And one of the first things she did was she sat her faculty down in August and she said, look, she put the charts up, put them in groups. She said, I want to know what you do well here. And she let them work on that in groups. And she walked around and listened and so forth. And they charted that. She put the charts up. Then she said, I want to know what you feel we need to improve here. They did that, they charted it, they put them on the walls, and they had discussions about that. But with Kathy, she didn't try, as many administrators do, to come in that first year and dictate and say, look, what you're doing isn't working, and here's what we're going to do. And you and I and all God's children who are teachers have seen administrators who will come in and just change everything based on what they think needs to be done. Without any conversation, it's not bottom up, it's top down. I tell teachers, I told them today in the workshop, look, you are the powers that be. You and your students and your administrators are the powers that be. And growth has to come from the bottom up. Continuous improvement has to be a part of your philosophy in terms of the power of we. It has to be us, not a binder. Get your teachers involved, get your teachers excited, harness their energy, harness the energy of the kids. And when teachers learn that it's fun to work together, then that, and this is part of your original question, that translates to students working together in their classroom. If the teacher is what I call a silo teacher, where she simply closes the door and does her own thing, she's much less likely to involve her students in the power of we. It's the power of me. It's the power of what I've always done. It's the status quo. And the status quo is a stern taskmaster. And that's where teachers run into problems. So administrators need to help teachers with that. Kathy Wong always said, her favorite saying was, "Is this good for students? If it isn't, we oughtn't to be doing it." In terms of the best feedback that I've ever received from teachers or educators generally, in terms of my help for them, came from Kathy Galford, a 6th grade teacher in Greenbrier section of Chesapeake, Virginia, Chesapeake City Schools. And Kathy Galford taught 6th grade language arts, and Kathy was doing what she always did. The status quo was part of what she did. She lacked energy, and she came to one of my workshops in 2007 or 8. And when she left, she emailed me and said, "I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to use the strategies. I'm going to do these things." And I said, "Great." And I said, "Can I come in and see you do it?" And she brought me in after, she said, let me get started on this, I'll bring you in. So after a couple of months, I went in, I think it was in the fall, and I watched this woman teach, and it was just incredible. I mean, the power of we was everywhere in that classroom. Those kids were and 2 of her students came to me at the end, 2 little girls, 6th graders, came up to me at the end very shyly, and they said, "Mr. Nash, we want you to know that we like coming to this classroom, and we like what she does." And I said, "Well, what does she do?" And she says, "She has us do the work." She called me in 2012 in the fall, all excited, and I knew that she was the Chesapeake City Schools Teacher of the Year, and I knew that she was the Regional Teacher of the Year. When she called me, she said, "I just want you to know that I have just been chosen as the 2013 Virginia Teacher of the Year." I want teachers to understand that they are creative human beings that can create powerful lesson plans with other teachers in the building without having to be told, and present those together, present those lesson plans on the same day and then talk about it, present them on different days and talk about it, and work together in order to, on the continuous improvement for themselves. Once they do this for themselves, they'll feel much more confident about working with kids and helping them do the same thing. I have presented at convocations, and I have a good friend who's in a city school district, and he told me that at their convocation, they actually brought the drum lines from all the high schools in and had them marching through the room, and they were throwing t-shirts at people and they were screaming and yelling. And he said, of course, it was a great day and everybody went out. "This is great, we're in this together, we're gonna do this." And of course, then the music fades and the drums stop and the t-shirts don't fit. And so they face the year without the strategies. They're not sure what to do. They have this great feeling on that one day. But as the days, what happens is they go back into their classrooms and they close the door. So "we're in this together" becomes "I'm in this alone." That's a problem. And so what my book shows them to do, and my workshops show them to do, is that they are the powers that be. They can make great progress with students and on their own, with their own progress as professionals, by working together with other teachers and and having their students work together as well. One of the reasons I wrote "And What About You," which is the supplemental book, is because it was supposed to be the appendix of the larger book, but it got too big. So we decided to turn it into another book. But it's a standalone book with tons of strategies: standing pair shares, squares paired, all of the other strategies that we use in the workshops. About 10 or 11 specific strategies are explained in there. Also, the price. We wanted to keep it at a price where teachers could afford the book. Many books on the market are so expensive that teachers can't afford to buy them. And What About You comes from working in pairs. I always have them. I'll give them 60 seconds. I don't care who starts, but halfway through, I want you to look at your partner and say, "And what about you?" and use their name. And so that's where that title comes from. That's the basic building block, is in the pair, I'm taking responsibility for you. Okay? I'm not just responsible for me now. I'm responsible for you. And so I bring you in and I stop talking. Some kids will talk forever. Eddie would talk till the end of time and not shut up. So you have to make them responsible, give them a time limit, and it can't be too big a time limit, and get them used to talking with each other and helping each other through those conversations. I guess I'm a little frightened, and yet I'm encouraged. I'm frightened because this generation of children is spending too much time with screens and not enough time with people. And when you spend time with people, you build relationships. And when you build relationships, you build empathy. You do not build empathy with screens. Body language in a face-to-face conversation will solve whatever problems you have with a conversation right there, right then. But kids will get a text, and then the other kid turns off his phone, and that kid's looking at that text, has no idea how that student meant that. And they worry about it all night. And they keep, what did you mean? What did you mean? And our suicide rates are climbing among those kids. The obesity rate is climbing. And now I see that sports is changing. The whole idea of sports is changing. There are now many indoor internet-based sports called sports. Okay? Now here's the problem with that. They're not moving. And the obesity rate is going to climb even more. And what some students are deciding is, I'd rather do that than go play soccer. I'd rather do that than go play football or track or whatever. And as that thing catches hold, we've got another reason in the schoolhouse to make sure that those kids get plenty of exercise and face-to-face time. So I'm encouraged by what I see around the country. And at the same time, I'm a little frightened because we need to pick up the pace on those things and think hard about what we're doing for kids.